The pack did not begin falling apart when Sarah Whitfield left. It began falling apart the moment everyone realized she had been the only one holding it together. At midnight, the Blackthorne Pack house was still awake. Not loudly, not completely, just enough. A few guards moved through the western corridor with tired steps. Someone laughed softly near the kitchen entrance. Rain tapped against the long windows, thin and cold, while the old lamps burned low along the stone walls. Sarah Whitfield walked through it all with a stack of documents pressed against her chest. Patrol schedules, winter ration lists, healer supply requests, 3 complaints from border families, 2 unresolved debt records, 1 unsigned order Caleb had forgotten to approve before leaving the last council meeting angry. Again, Sarah carried them carefully, keeping the corners from bending beneath her fingers. The pack seal on the top folder had been stamped wrong, slightly crooked, but she had fixed that too before anyone noticed. That was how most things worked. Sarah noticed. Sarah fixed. No one asked. The halls smelled of rain, wood smoke, and wolf. Familiar. Heavy. Home once. She passed the infirmary doors and paused when she saw the medicine crate still sitting outside. Wrong place. It should have been delivered to the Eastern Healing Room before dusk. Sarah shifted the documents to one arm, bent down, and checked the label. Fever tonic. Bandages. Silver burn salve. All overdue. Her mouth tightened. Not anger. Habit. She carried the crate inside, placed it where the healers would find it, and made a small note in the margin of the supply ledger tucked beneath her documents. No one would know. By morning, the tonic would be there. The healer would think someone else had handled it. The warriors would be treated. The system would continue. Because Sarah had moved quietly through the cracks before they became damage. She stepped back into the corridor. A young Omega servant nearly collided with her near the stairwell. "Oh, Luna, Sarah. I'm sorry." Sarah steadied the girl with one hand. "You're all right." The girl looked exhausted. Dark half-moons beneath her eyes. Flower on her sleeves. Fear in the way she kept glancing toward the council wing. Sarah noticed that too. "Have you eaten?" The girl blinked, confused by the question. Not yet." Sarah reached into the pocket of her cloak and handed her a wrapped piece of bread she had saved from dinner. "Eat before you return to the kitchen. But this is yours." "I'm not hungry." That was not entirely true, but it was useful. The girl bowed quickly, eyes wet with gratitude over something too small to matter and too rare not to. Sarah continued walking. Her reflection moved beside her in the dark window glass. Soft face, pale skin, full cheeks. A body court women had called gentle when they meant unimpressive. Sarah looked away. She had learned not to measure herself against women like Madison Hale. Madison was sharp where Sarah was soft. Elegant where Sarah was warm. The kind of woman who entered a room and made men straighten their backs. Sarah entered rooms and made sure there were enough chairs. That was the difference. 6 years beside Alpha King Caleb Blackthorne had taught her exactly what people valued and what they used. At the top of the stairs, she stopped to adjust the silver clasp on her sleeve. Caleb had fastened it for her earlier that evening. His fingers had brushed her wrist. Quiet, almost tender. "Don't wait up for me," he had said. For one foolish second, Sarah had almost believed there was still something in his voice worth waiting for. Almost. Then he had left for the council chamber, and Sarah had spent the next hour correcting the meeting notes he would need before sunrise. She reached the end of the corridor and saw a light beneath the council doors. Voices moved inside, low at first, then laughter. Sarah slowed. She had not meant to listen. She had only come to deliver the documents. Then Caleb's voice cut through the wood. "You actually think she holds this pack together?" The hallway went still. Sarah stopped with her hand inches from the door. Inside, someone laughed. Another elder answered. "She certainly seems to think she does." More laughter. Sarah's fingers tightened around the documents. Not enough to crumple them, just enough to feel the edges bite. For a moment, all she heard was the rain. Then Caleb spoke again. Calm, amused, careless. And every quiet thing Sarah had ever repaired inside that pack seemed to hold its breath. Caleb Blackthorne spoke again, and Sarah Whitfield learned how softly a person could be erased. "She is useful," he said. The words slipped through the council doors without effort. Not shouted, not sharpened, not thrown in anger. That made them worse. Anger could be regretted. Cruelty spoken calmly had already been accepted by the soul before it reached the mouth. Sarah stood outside with the documents pressed to her chest. rain whispering against the windows behind her, listening to the man she had loved define her like an object in storage. Inside the council chamber, Elder Thomas Grant gave a low chuckle. Useful. Caleb answered as if the word needed no shame. Loyal. Quiet. Easy to manage. The laughter came immediately. Men who had eaten food she arranged. Men whose sons she had sent medicine to. Men whose disputes she had settled before they reached blood. They laughed like Sarah was a chair that had proven comfortable. Her fingers tightened around the files. The top page bent slightly beneath her thumb. She noticed. Even then. Even there. And slowly, carefully, she smoothed it flat. That small motion steadied her. Not because the paper mattered. Because if she let one thing break in her hands, the rest of her might follow. Madison Hale's voice drifted next. Soft. Sweet. Too close to Caleb. She does make things easier for you. Another laugh. Sarah's eyes lowered to the strip of light beneath the door. Madison had not needed to raise her voice. Women like Madison rarely did. They understood the power of sounding harmless while standing exactly where another woman should have been protected. Caleb did not correct her. Of course he did not. He only exhaled, almost amused. That is what I said. She is useful. Useful. The words settled inside Sarah's chest with a strange quietness. Not pain. Not yet. Recognition. 6 years arranged themselves in her mind with terrible clarity. The nights she stayed awake after border attacks, matching wounded warriors with available healers while Caleb slept through the exhaustion he would later call victory. The mornings she sat beside angry elders, listening until their pride softened enough to accept compromise. The winters she cut her own household budget so orphan pups could receive boots. The ceremonies where she stood beside Caleb in a dress chosen to hide her softness, smiling while Madison's friends whispered that the Luna looked kind but not royal. Useful. That was the name for all of it. Not beloved. Not respected. Not seen. Useful. Someone inside asked. Then why keep her as Luna if you intend to let Madison handle more of the court? Sarah stopped breathing. The room quieted just enough for the answer to matter. Caleb did not hesitate. Because Sarah keeps the pack calm. A pause. Then he added, and calm is easier to rule. There it was. The truth beneath the insult. He did not need her heart. He needed her labor. He needed her softness as padding between his pride and the consequences of it. Sarah looked down at the silver clasp on her sleeve. The one he had fastened an hour earlier with almost gentle fingers. Don't wait up for me. She almost smiled. Not happily. Not bitterly. Worse. Clearly. He had not meant sleep. He had meant hope. Madison spoke again, lighter this time. And does she know that? A chair shifted. Glass touched wood. Caleb answered after a breath, voice still careless enough to be honest. She knows what she needs to know. The council laughed again. The sound moved through the door and struck nothing dramatic in Sarah. No sob rose. No tears came. No shaking breath escaped. That surprised her most. She had imagined betrayal as a loud thing. A break. A collapse. A wound that announced itself. But this felt quiet. Cold. Almost clean. As if a final knot inside her had loosened and left behind something sharper than grief. Understanding. Sarah took one step back from the council door. The documents remained in her arms. Still corrected. Still organized. Still exactly what Caleb needed before morning. For a moment, she considered leaving them on the floor. Let him wonder. Let them scramble. Let one small crack show before dawn. But habit lifted her hand toward the door. Duty. That old obedient ghost. Then Madison laughed again from inside, delicate and pleased. Sarah lowered her hand. No, not tonight. Tonight, the pack could wait for what it had never valued. Inside the chamber, Elder Grant asked one more question. And if she finally realizes it? Silence followed. Brief. Interested. Sarah stood in the shadowed hallway and waited for Caleb to defend the woman who had spent 6 years defending him. He did not. His answer came smoothly, almost lazily. She won't leave. Another pause. Then the sentence that ended everything. She has nowhere else to go. She has nowhere else to go. The sentence did not strike Sarah Whitfield immediately. It entered quietly, settled slowly, then changed the shape of every year behind her. She stood outside the council chamber with the rain at her back and the pack's unfinished documents in her arms, listening to the man she had once called home explain why she would never leave him. Not because she was loved, not because she was protected, Not because the bond between them still meant something sacred, because he believed she had nowhere else to go. Inside, the council chamber remained silent for 1 second. Then Elder Thomas Grant laughed. Low, satisfied. A few others followed. Madison Hale did not laugh loudly. She never needed to. Her amusement came softer than that, a delicate breath of approval that slipped through the door and somehow sounded worse than every elder's open mockery. Sarah looked down at the documents. Patrol schedules, ration lists, healer requests, the bones of a pack that did not know whose hands kept setting them back into place. The top page still carried Caleb's and signed order. His name waited at the bottom. Blackthorne, Alpha King, her husband, the man who thought her loyalty was a locked door. Her thumb moved across the paper once. Slowly, not tenderly, as if saying goodbye to a habit. Inside, Madison asked, You sound very certain. Caleb's chair creaked. I know, Sarah. Sarah's eyes closed. There it was. The deepest wound. Not that he did not know her. That he believed he did. He knew the version of her that stayed quiet after insults. The version that smiled beside him at banquets. The version that fixed every broken arrangement before it reached his desk. The version that lowered her eyes when elders spoke over her, because challenging them would create trouble he would later ask her to soothe. He knew the woman she had become to survive beside him. He did not know the woman underneath had been counting every small death. Madison's voice drifted again. And if she surprises you? Caleb gave a short laugh. She will not. The words were so calm that something inside Sarah finally stopped struggling. Not broke. Stopped. There was a difference. Breaking was loud. It scattered pieces everywhere, gave people something to step around, something to pity, something to repair if they wanted to feel noble. This was quieter. A flame covered by glass. No smoke. No sound. Just the sudden absence of warmth. Sarah opened her eyes. The hallway looked the same. The lamps still burned low along the walls. Rain still streaked the windows. The Blackthorne crest still hung above the council doors, carved into dark wood like a promise that had never included her name. Nothing in the world had changed. Everything in her had. Inside the room, Caleb continued speaking, unaware that the woman he had just dismissed was standing close enough to hear each breath between his words. She has endured far more than this, he said. A few hurt feelings will not make her abandon her duties. Duties? Sarah almost smiled. There were words men used when they wanted devotion without gratitude. Duty was one of them. Loyalty was another. Calm was the prettiest. She knows the pack needs stability, Caleb added. Elder Grant hummed. And Madison? A pause. Small. Dangerous. Sarah listened. Caleb answered more carefully this time. Madison understands the future I have to build. No one laughed after that. They did not need to. The future. Sarah felt the silver clasp on her sleeve press coldly against her wrist. 1 hour ago, Caleb had fastened it for her. 1 hour ago, his fingers had been gentle enough to make her foolish. Now he spoke of a future beside another woman, while Sarah stood outside the door carrying the labor that made his presence survivable. She looked down at herself in the dim reflection of the window. Soft cheeks, pale skin, full figure beneath a simple midnight blue dress. A woman court ladies called sweet when they meant harmless. Aluna elders praised for patience when they meant obedience. A wife a king believed would never leave because he had never imagined she possessed a life beyond what he allowed. Sarah lifted her chin. Not much. Enough. The documents in her arms no longer felt like duty. They felt like evidence. Every page proved she had been there. Every correction. Every signature mark. Every margin note. Every crisis prevented before it could become loud enough for Caleb to notice. She stepped forward and placed the entire stack on the small table beside the council door. Neatly, exactly aligned, the way she always did things. Then she took the top folder back. The pack ledger. Not because it was royal, because it was hers. Her handwriting filled it. Her calculations. Her quiet repairs. Her record of everything the pack owed and everything she had paid without asking to be seen. That, she would keep until she decided what to do with it. Inside, Madison said something Sarah could not hear. Caleb answered with a softer tone. The kind he had not used with Sarah in months. That did not hurt as much as it should have. Perhaps the heart could only receive so many confirmations before it stopped pretending each one was new. Sarah turned away from the council doors. Her steps made almost no sound against the stone. At the end of the corridor, she paused once. Not to look back. to listen. The laughter had resumed. Good. Let them laugh. Let Caleb sit in that room surrounded by elders, Madison, and the easy confidence of a man who believed a woman's silence meant ownership. By morning, he would learn the difference. Sarah walked toward the western staircase with the pack ledger held against her chest. No tears, no shaking, no farewell forming in her throat. Only clarity. Cold, complete, mercifully final. Behind her, the council door opened. Light spilled into the hallway. Footsteps followed. Sarah? Caleb's voice. Closer now. Too late in a way he did not yet understand. Sarah stopped walking, but she did not turn around. Sarah? Caleb Blackthorne said her name as if it still belonged to him. That was the first thing Sarah noticed. Not the low warning in his voice. Not the council lights spilling across the hallway floor behind him. Not Madison Hale's pale silhouette lingering just inside the doorway, watching with quiet interest. His tone. Familiar. Possessive. Certain that if he said her name correctly enough, she would turn around. Sarah did not. She stood near the end of the corridor with the pack ledger held against her chest, the rain-dark windows stretching along one side, the old Blackthorne portraits watching from the other. Caleb's footsteps came closer. Not hurried. He did not believe this required urgency yet. You are awake late, he said. Sarah looked at the window instead of him. Rain moved down the glass in thin silver lines. You asked for the documents. A pause. Small. Then his gaze dropped to the table beside the council chamber, where the corrected files waited in a perfect stack. You could have sent them with a servant. Yes, Sarah said. I could have. Something in her voice made him stop. Not the words. The absence inside them. Caleb had heard Sarah tired before. He had heard her disappointed, patient, wounded, even quietly angry in the first years when she still believed explaining pain could change the person causing it. He had never heard her empty. Behind him, someone shifted in the council chamber. Madison. Sarah did not need to look. Caleb did. Just briefly. A mistake. Sarah saw the reflection in the window, saw his eyes flick toward the doorway, toward the woman who had sat beside him while he discussed Sarah like household furniture. Then back to her. Too late. How long were you standing here? He asked. Careful now. Measured. A king asking a question while already preparing to control the answer. Sarah turned at last. Slowly. Her face was calm. That unsettled him more than tears would have. Long enough. Caleb's jaw tightened. The hallway seemed to narrow between them. The lamps burned low. Rain softened the rest of the pack house into a distant hush. From inside the council chamber, no one laughed now. Good. Let them listen too. Caleb lowered his voice. Whatever you think you heard. Sarah stepped forward and placed the remaining ledger against his chest. He took it automatically, because she had handed him things for 6 years, and his body still remembered being served before his pride understood what was happening. This is the winter ledger, she said. The patrol adjustments are marked in blue. The healer debt is settled through the next moon. The eastern families will need grain before the first frost. Caleb stared at her. Sarah, you should sign the border order before morning. Ryan has asked 3 times. His fingers tightened on the ledger. Stop. She did. Immediately. Not because he commanded it. Because she had finished what she wanted to say. For one long second, they only looked at each other. Caleb searched her face, waiting for the familiar crack, the tremble in her mouth, the wet shine in her eyes, the wounded question he could answer with half an apology and a touch on her wrist. Why would you say that? Do I mean so little to you? What does Madison have that I do not? Questions he could survive because they still made him necessary. Sarah gave him none. That was the first thing he could not control. You misunderstood, he said. There it was. Not apology. Reduction. Sarah almost smiled. No, the word was quiet. Caleb's eyes sharpened. No, I understood perfectly. A sound moved inside the council chamber. Elder Grant, perhaps. Or Madison inhaling too quickly. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice until it became private by force. This is not the place. Sarah looked past him once, toward the open doorway. Madison stood there now. Beautiful. Composed. Watching Sarah as if waiting to see whether softness would finally collapse into humiliation. Sarah met her eyes. Madison's expression faltered first. Only slightly. Enough. Then Sarah looked back at Caleb. You are right, she said. This was never my place. His brows drew together. Do not twist my words. I do not need to. The sentence landed cleanly. Caleb's hand tightened around the ledger. For the first time, something close to anger moved through his face. Good. Anger was easier for him than fear. You are making this larger than it is. Sarah studied him. 6 years. 6 years of learning the shape of his excuses. He always made wounds smaller after causing them. Easier to step over. Easier to demand that everyone else step over too. Smaller than it is. A few hurt feelings. Court pressure. Political necessity. Duty. Stability. Useful words from a man who believed naming damage differently made it disappear. Sarah's voice remained soft. You call me useful. Caleb did not answer. You call me loyal. Still nothing. Quiet. His jaw flexed. Easy to manage. The hallway went completely silent. Even the rain seemed distant now. Caleb glanced toward the council door again, but no one saved him. No elder laughed. No advisor interrupted. Madison looked down. Sarah continued. You said I would not leave because I had nowhere else to go. Caleb's face changed. There. Not guilt. Not enough. Recognition. He had not expected her to hear that part. That was not meant for you. Sarah nodded once. I know. The answer confused him. That makes it worse. Caleb breathed in slowly. His control was returning. She could see it. The king assembling himself beneath the husband's inconvenience. You are upset, he said. You should sleep before we discuss this. Sleep. As if rest could dull disrespect into something digestible. As if mourning could make her smaller again. Sarah looked at the silver clasp on her sleeve. His clasp. His almost tenderness. She reached for it. Caleb noticed the movement. Sarah. She unfastened the clasp. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. Then she placed it on top of the ledger in his hands. His eyes dropped to it. A small object. Silver. Harmless. Fatal. I will not need this anymore. His gaze lifted sharply. What does that mean? Sarah stepped back. Just one step. But it was the first space she had taken from him in years. It means the ledgers are current. The debts are paid. The pack will have what it needs until morning. Caleb stared at her as if she were speaking another language. And after morning? Sarah's expression did not change. That will be your responsibility. Something cold moved through his face. You are my Luna. No, she said. The word did not rise. It did not shake. It simply stood between them and refused to move. Madison's lips parted. Caleb's voice dropped. Careful. Sarah tilted her head slightly. Not defiant. Done. You were careful enough for both of us tonight. For the first time, Caleb looked afraid. Not fully. Not honestly. Just the beginning of it. A shadow crossing pride. Where are you going? He asked. Sarah turned toward the western staircase. Good night, Your Majesty. The title stopped him harder than shouting would have. She felt it. The silence behind her changed shape. Caleb had been called many things by many people. My king. Alpha. Your Majesty. But not by Sarah. Not like that. Not with every private door between them closing inside 2 words. Sarah, he said again. This time, her name sounded less certain. She paused at the first stare. Not to answer. Only to give him one final chance to understand without being taught. He did not take it. You will calm down by morning, he said. Sarah looked back over her shoulder. The woman at the end of the corridor was soft-faced, pale, full-figured, and calm enough to be mistaken for harmless by men who had never feared silence until it left them. No, she said gently. By morning, I will be gone. Then she descended the staircase without looking back. Behind her, Caleb Blackthorne stood holding the ledger, the silver clasp, and the first true shape of what he had destroyed. Before dawn, Sarah Whitfield left the pack the same way she had carried it for 6 years. Quietly, without applause, without witnesses, without anyone understanding the weight of what was happening until the silence had already done its work. Her chamber looked almost untouched beneath the single candle burning near the vanity. The bed remained neatly made. The curtains were half drawn against the rain. A blue dress lay folded across the chair where Grace Miller had placed it that morning, still waiting for a Luna who no longer intended to wear it. Sarah moved through the room with careful hands. One cloak, one plain dress, a coin pouch, a small knife tucked into a leather sheath. The pack ledger. Nothing more. Nothing that belonged to the Blackthorne name. Nothing that could be mistaken for theft when Caleb began searching for reasons easier to face than the truth. She paused at the mirror. For a moment, a woman looked back at her who seemed too soft for leaving. Round cheeks, pale skin, gentle brown eyes, full figure wrapped in a simple night dress beneath a dark traveling cloak. The court had always mistaken that softness for weakness. Caleb had mistaken it for permanence. Sarah reached for the lunar ring on her finger. Silver, heavy, engraved with the Blackthorne crest. For 6 years, it had told the pack she belonged beside their king. Tonight, it told her something else. How long she had stayed after belonging stopped feeling like protection. She slipped it off. The skin beneath was faintly marked, a pale circle where the ring had rested too long. Sarah studied it calmly, then placed the ring on the vanity. Beside it, she laid the silver clasp Caleb had fastened earlier and the ceremonial cloak embroidered with the pack crest. Neatly. No note. No accusation. No farewell. If Caleb wanted an explanation, he could remember his own words. She has nowhere else to go. Sarah almost smiled. Not bitterly. Not sadly. Clearly, he had been wrong. There was always somewhere else to go once staying became another form of disappearance. A soft knock touched the door. Sarah did not startle. She already knew the rhythm. Luna, Grace Miller whispered. Sarah opened the door halfway. Grace stood in the corridor with a small lantern in one hand and fear all over her face. She was barely 20, narrow-shouldered, red-haired, and loyal in the quiet way people became when no one important expected anything from them. Her eyes dropped to the travel bag, then to Sarah's bare hand. The color left her face. You are leaving. Sarah stepped aside. Grace entered and closed the door with both hands, as if afraid the hallway might hear her breathing. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Rain tapped against the window. Somewhere below, the last guards changed posts. The pack slept through the moment it lost its Luna. Grace's voice broke first. Should I inform the Alpha King? Sarah looked at the ring on the vanity. No. Grace swallowed. He will be furious. Yes. He will send riders. Probably. He may call it betrayal. Sarah fastened the travel bag. Then he will finally understand how easily words can be misused. Grace's eyes filled. Sarah softened, but did not stop. She crossed the room and took the lantern from Grace's trembling hand, setting it on the table before the flame could shake itself out. Listen to me. Grace nodded quickly. You saw nothing. Sarah, no, her voice remained gentle. By morning, you will say I seemed tired after council business. You brought fresh linen. I dismissed you. That is all. Grace shook her head. I cannot lie to him. You can survive him. The sentence landed harder than Sarah intended. Grace went still. Sarah touched her shoulder. I am not asking you to be brave for me inside a house that punishes loyalty when it points in the wrong direction. A tear slipped down Grace's cheek. Sarah wiped it away once, almost motherly. Do not waste tears here. Grace tried to laugh and failed. Where will you go? Sarah looked toward the dark window. Beyond it lay the western woods, the old stone road, the border river, and a territory Caleb did not command. I do not know yet. That was not entirely true. She knew the direction. She did not know the life. For once, that felt honest. Grace moved to the wardrobe and pulled out a gray wool cloak, thicker than the one Sarah had chosen. Take this. The rain is getting worse. Sarah hesitated. It is yours. So was half the food you gave away this winter. That almost broke the silence. Almost. Sarah took the cloak. Thank you. Grace nodded, wiping her face quickly. Sarah lifted the pack ledger and placed it inside her bag. Then she stopped, reconsidered, and pulled it out again. No, that ledger belonged where Caleb could see it. Not all of it. Only the final page. She sat at the small writing desk, opened the ledger, and turned past columns of debts, food stores, healer accounts, patrol losses, elder fines, funeral funds, orphan stipends, and quiet repairs no one had ever praised. On the last blank line, she wrote one sentence. All debts paid. No one owes me anything. Then she tore out nothing. She signed nothing. She simply left the ledger open on the desk. Beside the ring. Beside the clasp. Beside the life she had finished carrying. Grace covered her mouth. Sarah stood. It is time. The two women crossed the chamber quietly. At the door, Sarah looked back once. Not at the bed. Not at the gowns. At the empty chair near the hearth where she had spent too many nights waiting for Caleb to come home as a husband instead of returning as a king. Then she turned away. The hallway outside was dim and cold. Grace walked with her as far as the servant's stair. No farther. That was the safest kindness Sarah could give her. At the landing, Grace caught her sleeve. Luna. Sarah looked at her. Grace corrected herself through tears. Sarah. The name sounded strange. Free. Sarah held her gaze. Take care of yourself. Grace shook her head. You always say that to everyone else. Sarah's expression softened. Then perhaps it is time I learned to mean it for myself. She descended the stairs. The lower corridors were nearly empty. One guard slept poorly near the kitchen archway, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. Another stood outside the armory, but his attention remained on the rain beyond the door. Sarah passed unseen. Of course she did. People had practiced not seeing her for years. At the back entrance, she stopped only long enough to lift the heavy latch. Cold air entered first. Wet earth. Pine. Freedom, though it did not yet feel gentle. The first step outside soaked the hem of her dress. The second took her beyond the lantern glow. By the third, the pack house began to blur behind sheets of rain. Sarah pulled the gray cloak around herself and walked toward the western tree line. No one called her name. No wolf howled. No door opened. Good. She had not left to be stopped. At the edge of the woods, she paused once and looked back. Blackthorne Pack house rose against the storm, bright in places, sleeping in others, proud and unaware that the woman it had called useful was no longer inside to keep it breathing smoothly. Sarah placed one hand over the place where the lunar ring had been. The skin felt bare, tender, alive. Then she turned toward the dark road beyond the trees. Behind her, the pack remained quiet. Ahead of her, everything was uncertain. For the first time in 6 years, uncertainty did not frighten her. Being certain had hurt more. Before dawn touched the eastern windows, Sarah Whitfield crossed the outer boundary of Blackthorne territory without a note, without a goodbye, and without looking back again. By morning, the empty chair did what Sarah Whitfield never had. It interrupted the Alpha King. The council chamber was already full when Caleb Blackthorne entered. Elders stood around the long oak table with documents in their hands and impatience on their faces. Madison Hale sat near the right side of the room, dressed in pale green, her hair pinned flawlessly, her expression calm enough to look innocent. The Luna chair remained empty. At first, Caleb did not look at it. He had spent the final hours before dawn convincing himself that Sarah had spoken from hurt pride. By morning, I will be gone. Women said things when wounded. That was what he told himself. Sarah was steady. Sarah was dutiful. Sarah understood the pack. Sarah would not embarrass him by vanishing over words spoken in a closed council chamber. So Caleb took his seat at the head of the table and reached for the first report. It was not there. He frowned. Where are the Eastern Patrol routes? Elder Thomas Grant shifted. We assumed Luna. Sarah prepared them. Caleb's jaw tightened at the name. Then where are they? No one answered. A young clerk hurried forward with a loose bundle of papers. My king, these were left outside the chamber last night. Caleb took them. The pages were corrected in Sarah's handwriting. Of course. Blue marks for patrol changes. Red marks for missing signatures. Small notes in the margins where she had anticipated questions no one had yet asked. His irritation eased for half a breath, then returned sharper. If she had left the reports, she had not left. She was making a point. Fine. He could survive a point. Begin, Caleb said. The clerk swallowed. The northern border team did not receive final confirmation. Caleb looked up. Why not? The order was unsigned. Every eye in the room moved toward him. Caleb reached for the border order. It was there, unsigned. His name waiting at the bottom. Blackthorne. A small mistake. His mistake. Sarah would normally have placed it before him twice, quietly, until he signed it just to stop the silent pressure of her patience. She had not done that this morning. Because her chair was empty, Caleb signed the order with more force than necessary. Next, the next problem came quickly. Then another. Then another. The healer supplies had arrived, but were not distributed to the Western Infirmary. 3 border families had come to collect grain vouchers that no one could find. The training yard had scheduled 2 patrol groups for the same shift, leaving the Southern Watch uncovered. Elder Grant had expected a debt summary that no one had copied. Every question circled back to the same absence. Sarah. Sarah knew where the vouchers were stored. Sarah tracked the supply routes. Sarah kept the patrol ledgers balanced. Sarah remembered which elder lied about numbers and which guard forgot to deliver messages after wine. Sarah. The name no one said at first because saying it gave the empty chair too much power. Madison leaned forward gently. Perhaps the household staff misplaced her files. Caleb looked at her. Her voice was soft. Helpful. Wrong. Sarah did not misplace files. That was the first crack. Not the ring. Not the words in the hallway. A file. A missing page. A system bending because the woman who had quietly held it together was no longer catching the weight. Caleb pushed back from the table. Where is she? The room went still. Elder Grant cleared his throat. Perhaps still resting. Send for her. A guard bowed and left. Caleb forced the meeting to continue. It did not. Within minutes, a healer arrived asking who had approved the emergency tonic distribution. A kitchen steward followed with a ration dispute. A messenger from the Western Farms demanded an answer on storm repairs. Ryan Carter, Caleb's beta, entered with mud on his boots and irritation in every line of his face. My king, Ryan said. The West Patrol was delayed because the revised route was never delivered. Caleb held up the papers. It is here. Ryan looked at the stack. With respect, that helps the council. It does not help the men standing in the rain. Silence. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Choose your tone carefully. Ryan did not lower his gaze. I am choosing the pack. That landed badly, because it sounded like something Sarah would have said. The guard returned before Caleb could answer. His face had changed. Not enough for the elders to notice. Enough for Caleb. What? Caleb asked. The guard bowed. Luna's Sarah is not in her chamber. Madison's fingers paused against her teacup. Caleb stood. What do you mean, not in her chamber? The bed was not slept in, my king. The council chamber became silent in a different way, no longer irritated. Listening, Caleb walked out before anyone could speak. Ryan followed. So did Madison, though Caleb did not invite her. The corridors seemed longer than they had last night. Too bright now. Too exposed. Servants stepped aside as Caleb passed, lowering their eyes with the particular fear of people who already knew more than their king. That deepened the unease. Sarah's chamber door stood open. Grace Miller stood outside it, pale and shaking. Caleb stopped in front of her. When did you last see her? Grace swallowed. Before midnight, my king. Did she say where she was going? No, did she take anything? Grace's eyes flickered toward the room. Caleb stepped past her. The chamber was clean. Too clean. The bed untouched. The wardrobe still filled with gowns. The ceremonial cloak folded across the chair. No broken mirror. No scattered jewelry. No letter waiting to wound him. Only absence. Then his gaze landed on the vanity. The lunar ring lay there, beside the silver clasp, beside the Blackthorne crest she had removed from her body before walking out of his territory. For the first time that morning, Caleb did not move. Behind him, Madison whispered, "She is upset." Caleb barely heard her. His gaze had shifted to the writing desk. The pack ledger lay open. He crossed to it slowly. Ryan came no farther than the doorway. Perhaps he already understood there were some ruins a man had to step into alone. Caleb looked down at the final line. Sarah's handwriting was neat. Steady. Unemotional. All debts paid. No one owes me anything. The words did not accuse him. That made them worse. They did not beg. They did not explain. They simply closed the account. Caleb's hand tightened against the desk. The wood creaked beneath his palm. Madison stepped closer. Caleb, she will come back. The sentence struck the room with familiar arrogance. She will come back. She has nowhere else to go. The echo was immediate. Fatal. Caleb turned toward her so sharply that Madison stopped. Do not say that. Her lips parted. No answer came. Caleb looked back at the ring, at the clasp, at the untouched bed, at the room Sarah had left without damaging because she had never needed destruction to prove she was done. His anger rose, then failed. There was nothing to punish. No betrayal to name. No stolen jewels. No dramatic letter. No insult he could throw back at her. She had taken one cloak, one dress, perhaps coin, perhaps the parts of herself he had not noticed were still hers. And she had left him everything else. The titles, the symbols, the duties, the pack he had ruled while she maintained it. Ryan spoke quietly from the doorway. My king. Caleb did not turn. What? She took nothing royal. A pause. Then Ryan added, softer and more dangerous. Only what was hers. The room went silent. Caleb stared at the empty chair near the hearth where Sarah used to sit with ledgers on her lap while he returned late from council, too tired to ask why she was still awake and too selfish to wonder what would happen if she stopped. Outside, the pack house was beginning to stumble. He could hear it now. Raised voices downstairs. Boots moving too quickly. A healer demanding missing records. An elder calling for Sarah and receiving no answer. A whole system reaching for a woman it had mistaken for background. Caleb picked up the lunar ring. It was cold, smaller than he remembered. The silver pressed into his palm like a question he should have asked 6 years ago. What have you been carrying for me? He closed his fist around it. No answer came. Only the empty room. Only the empty chair. Only the first terrible understanding that Sarah Whitfield had not abandoned the pack in a moment of emotion. She had left behind exactly enough for them to survive the morning, and nothing more. For 3 days, the pack remembered Sarah Whitfield too late. Not all at once. That would have been kinder. It remembered her in pieces. A missing signature at dawn. A medicine shipment sent to the wrong wing by noon. A border dispute no one had softened before it reached shouting. A frightened Omega standing outside the kitchen with a complaint no elder wanted to hear, because Sarah had always been the one who listened before complaints became rebellion. By the second day, the Blackthorne Pack house no longer sounded powerful. It sounded busy. Too busy. The kind of busy that came when everyone was moving and no one knew where anything belonged. Caleb Blackthorne stood at the head of the council table while voices collided around him. The Western grain vouchers are still missing. The healer accounts do not match the winter budget. The Southern Patrol says they never received the revised route. 3 families are waiting outside. Elder Grant refuses to sign without Sarah's numbers. At her name, the room changed. Slightly. Enough. No one looked toward the empty Luna chair anymore unless they forgot themselves. Then they looked away quickly, as if absence could accuse. Caleb heard all of it with the Luna ring closed inside his fist. He had carried it for 3 days. Not openly. Not where Madison could see it. Not where elders could whisper about weakness. Inside his pocket. Against his palm. Cold when he forgot her. Cutting when he remembered. Ryan Carter stood near the lower end of the table, arms crossed, mud still dried along the hem of his coat. He had slept less than anyone and looked like he blamed Caleb personally for every missing page. He was not wrong. Caleb looked at him. Find the vouchers. Ryan's mouth tightened. They were already found. Then why are the families still waiting? Because Sarah had notes attached to each one. Who needed grain, who needed medicine, who had lost a worker, who had lied twice before but still had children to feed. We have the vouchers. We do not have her judgment. Silence. Elder Thomas Grant shifted uncomfortably. Caleb's voice lowered. Are you suggesting the pack cannot function without her? Ryan did not flinch. I am saying it was functioning through her. The sentence settled over the council table with uncomfortable precision. Madison Hale, seated near the window, finally spoke. She kept records. Others can learn. Ryan turned his head slowly. She kept people from becoming problems you could not charm away. Madison's cheeks colored. Caleb said nothing. That was new. 3 days ago, he would have corrected Ryan for the tone alone. 3 days ago, he would have protected Madison from discomfort and called it fairness. Now he looked at the empty chair and understood that comfort had been another thing Sarah had paid for. Not his. Everyone's. A clerk entered with a stack of letters. My king, these arrived from the lower village. Caleb took them. The first was from a widow whose roof Sarah had arranged to repair before winter. The second from a healer asking whether Luna Sarah still wanted the orphan tonic fund extended. The third from a warrior's mother thanking Sarah for sending his last letter home after the border attack 3 months ago. Caleb stopped reading. The room blurred at the edges. He had known about the attack. Of course he had. He had stood before the wounded men, spoken of honor, praised sacrifice, ordered stronger patrols. Then moved on. Sarah had written to their mothers. He had not known. Or worse, he had not asked. Caleb folded the letter slowly. What else did she do? No one answered at first. Then one of the younger elders cleared his throat. She handled the widow's stipends. A healer near the door added quietly. And the silver burn records. A kitchen steward said, and the ration complaints. Ryan looked at the table. And the burial funds. Another silence. Heavier. Caleb looked up. Burial funds. Ryan's jaw flexed. For the families of warriors who died without enough savings. Sarah covered 3 from her personal allowance last winter. Elder Grant looked away. Caleb felt the ring cut deeper into his palm. The room suddenly seemed too small for his body. Too warm. Too full of witnesses to his ignorance. Madison whispered. She never told anyone. Ryan's answer was flat. She was not doing it to be praised. That struck harder than accusation. Because Caleb understood then that Sarah's silence had never been empty. It had been full of things he had not deserved to hear. By the third night, the pack house felt different. Less certain. Candles burned later. Servants moved in anxious clusters. Warriors argued over schedules that no longer aligned. Elder Grant snapped at a clerk and then stopped mid-sentence because Sarah would have been the one to smooth it over. But Sarah was gone. No one smoothed anything. Grace Miller passed Caleb in the lower corridor carrying folded linens. She bowed. Properly. Coldly. "Grace," he said. She stopped. Her face went pale, but she did not tremble this time. "When Sarah left," Caleb said, and the words tasted wrong because he still wanted to say, "When Sarah comes back." "Did she say anything?" Grace's eyes lowered. "No, my king. Nothing. Always nothing." Caleb almost let her go. Then he asked the question that had been clawing at him since morning. Was she afraid? Grace looked up. The answer in her eyes came before her voice. No, Caleb's chest tightened. She was calm, Grace said. Very calm. Of course. Sarah had not left like a woman running from fear. She had left like a woman walking out of a house already burning behind her. Did she hate me? Grace's lips parted. For a servant, honesty could be dangerous. For a loyal woman, silence could be worse. I do not think hate was what made her leave. Caleb stared at her. What did? Grace's voice softened. Exhaustion. The word went through him cleanly. Not betrayal. Not rage. Not jealousy over Madison. Exhaustion. A quieter accusation. A worse one. Grace bowed again and walked away before he could ask anything else. Caleb remained in the corridor long after she left. Rain had stopped outside. The windows reflected him back to himself. Alpha King. Husband. Destroyer of things he thought would endure because he had never bothered to ask how they survived. Near midnight, Ryan entered the council chamber carrying a weather-stained report. Caleb was alone at the table with Sarah's open ledger in front of him. He had read the final line so many times that the word seemed carved into the inside of his skull. All debts paid. No one owes me anything. Ryan stopped near the door. My king. Caleb did not look up. You found her. Ryan hesitated. That was answer enough. Caleb lifted his head. She crossed the western boundary before dawn the night she left. His wolf stirred. Sharp. Immediate. Where? Ryan's expression hardened. Reed territory. Silence fell. Nathan Reed. Rival alpha of the western packs. A man Caleb had never trusted because Nathan welcomed the people other territories called inconvenient. Runaway omegas. Disgraced healers. Banished daughters. Widows with debts. Men who refused cruel orders. And now Sarah. Caleb stood slowly. She went to him. She crossed into his lands, Ryan said carefully. That is all we know. But Caleb heard what Ryan did not say. Sarah had gone somewhere he could not simply command open. The western boundary was old, politically fragile, and protected by treaties Sarah had once reminded him to read. He had ignored her. Of course. Prepare, riders, Caleb said. Ryan did not move. Caleb's eyes sharpened. That was an order. With respect, my king, if you cross into Reed territory with armed riders, Nathan will call it aggression. I am not asking Nathan for permission to retrieve my Luna. Ryan's face changed. There was pity in it. Caleb hated that most. Is she still your Luna? The question landed between them like a drawn blade. Caleb's hand closed around the ring in his pocket. Yes, he wanted to say. Of course. By law. By bond. By every vow she had made before the pack. But the ring was in his pocket because Sarah had removed it. The ledger was open because she had closed every debt. The chair was empty because she had walked away. Ryan stepped closer and placed the report on the table. There is one more thing. Caleb looked down. The scout's handwriting was rough but clear. A woman matching Luna Sarah's description was seen at the western river crossing. She wore a gray cloak. No escort. No crest. She requested no shelter under Blackthorne name. Reed border guards received her at sunrise. Received. Not captured. Not questioned. Received. Caleb's wolf rose with a sound low enough to make the lamps tremble. Ryan held his ground. Caleb read the final line. Alpha Nathan Reed was present. The room went quiet. No council noise. No Madison. No servants. Only Caleb, the empty chair, and the knowledge that Sarah had reached another alpha before he had even understood she was truly gone. He saw her in his mind. Soft-faced. Pale. Full-figured beneath a gray cloak. Calm enough to walk through rain alone. Strong enough not to look back. He had told the council she had nowhere else to go. By sunrise, she had proven him wrong. Caleb closed his eyes. For the first time, the pain was not anger wearing a better name. It was loss. Plain. Late. Deserved. Prepare one horse, he said. Ryan frowned. One. Caleb opened his eyes. If I arrive with riders, I arrive as a king. He picked up Sarah's ring from his pocket and looked at it in his palm. Small. Cold. Accusing. If I arrive alone, he said quietly, perhaps she will believe I finally came as the man who failed her. Ryan's expression did not soften, but he nodded once. Outside, the pack continued stumbling through the night. Inside, Caleb Blackthorne understood only the beginning of what Sarah had carried, and it was already too heavy. Sarah Whitfield reached the western border at sunrise with mud on the hem of her cloak and no name she wished to use. The rain had stopped an hour earlier, leaving the world pale and washed clean. Mist hung low between the pine trees. The old river moved quietly beneath the stone bridge, silver beneath the first thin light of morning. On the other side waited reed territory. Not safety. Not yet. Only a place Caleb Blackthorne did not own. For the first time in 6 years, that was enough. Sarah stopped before the bridge and pressed one hand against the rough stone rail. Her legs ached. Her shoulders hurt from carrying the travel bag. Her stomach twisted with hunger she had ignored since yesterday evening. None of it frightened her. Pain from leaving was different from pain from staying. Leaving pain moved. Staying pain settled into the bones and taught them to bow. A border guard stepped out from the trees. Tall, broad, young enough to reach for his weapon too quickly. State your name. Sarah lifted her head. Her hood had fallen back during the last mile. Rain had loosened her chestnut hair around her face. Her cheeks were cold, pale, and full from exhaustion rather than softness now. She knew what she looked like. A woman alone, unarmed except for a small knife. No crest, no escort, no permission. Sarah Whitfield, she said. The guard's eye sharpened. Recognition moved across his face before training hit it. Blackthorne Luna. Not anymore. The guard hesitated. Behind him, another figure appeared at the far end of the bridge. Alpha Nathan Reed. Sarah knew him from council reports, treaty meetings, and the kind of warnings Caleb gave about men he could not control. Nathan was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a plain charcoal coat rather than royal black. No crown, no silver display, nothing theatrical. He did not need it. Some authority announced itself by making rooms kneel. Nathan's felt different. It made space. He walked to the center of the bridge and stopped several feet away from her. Not too close. Sarah noticed that first. His gaze moved once over her muddy cloak, the travel bag, her bare ring finger, then returned to her face. No pity. Good. She was tired enough that pity might have wounded her. Do you need protection? Nathan asked. Or permission? The question entered the morning quietly, cleanly. Sarah stared at him. No one had asked her that in Blackthorne territory. They asked what Caleb wanted, what the council required, what the pack needed, what stability demanded, not what she needed. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Protection, she said. A pause. Then, with a steadiness that surprised even her, I am done asking for permission. Nathan's expression did not change, but something in the guards did. A shift. A silent understanding. The Alpha had asked. She had answered. That mattered here. Nathan nodded once. Then cross. The young guard moved aside immediately. Sarah stepped onto the bridge. Halfway across, she expected something to pull at her. The bond. The old habit. The fear of Caleb's anger reaching across the river like a hand closing around the back of her neck. Nothing came. Only wind. Only water. Only the sound of her own footsteps carrying her farther from the life that had mistaken her endurance for consent. When she reached Nathan's side, he did not touch her. He did not offer his arm as a claim. He did not ask what Caleb had done. He simply turned and walked beside her, matching her pace as if she had the right to arrive slowly. That almost broke her. Almost. At the border station, a healer brought warm tea, bread, and a dry blanket without asking questions. Sarah accepted all three with hands that trembled only after she sat down. Nathan stood near the doorway while the healer checked her pulse. You are not injured, the healer said gently. Sarah looked at the cup in her hands. No, the healer paused. Exhausted then. Sarah almost laughed. Yes. Nathan's jaw shifted once. Not anger at her. Good. She had learned to recognize men who made a woman's pain about their own reaction. Nathan did not move closer. He did not promise vengeance. He did not ask for loyalty in exchange for shelter. After the healer left, Sarah sat alone with him in the small room warmed by a stove and the smell of cedar. Nathan spoke first. Blackthorne will come. I know. With writers, perhaps. He may. With claims. Sarah looked at her bare hand. The faint ring mark remained. Tender. Visible. A ghost of ownership. He can claim what I left on the vanity. Nathan's eyes lowered briefly to her hand, then back to her face. And you? Sarah met his gaze. I belong to myself. The words were quiet. They still felt unfamiliar, but they did not feel false. Nathan inclined his head. Then Reed territory recognizes that. The sentence had no romance in it. No hunger. No attempt to turn rescue into debt. That was why Sarah believed it. By noon, she had slept for 2 hours in a plain guest room above the border station. When she woke, the pack ledger lay beside her bag, still dry, still hers. She opened it once, then closed it again. All debts paid. No one owes me anything. Not even gratitude. Especially not Caleb. Near sunset, a horn sounded from the western road. Lo! Warning! Sarah rose before anyone knocked. She already knew. Nathan met her at the bottom of the stairs. He came alone, he said. Sarah's hand stilled on the banister. Alone. Not with writers. Not with council banners. Not with Madison behind him. Something twisted in her chest. Not hope. Memory being foolish. Nathan saw too much to miss it, but he did not name it. Do you want to see him? Sarah looked toward the open door, where evening light stretched across the road beyond the station. Far outside, near the boundary stones, a single black horse stood beneath the pines. Caleb Blackthorne had dismounted. He wore no crown, no ceremonial coat, only dark riding clothes and a face that looked older than it had 3 days ago. In his hand, something silver caught the light. Sarah's ring. Her breath changed. Only slightly. Nathan waited. No pressure. No command. No question disguised as advice. Sarah stepped down from the final stair. Yes, she said, then added, because the word mattered now, here. Nathan nodded. Together they walked outside. Caleb saw her before she reached the boundary line. He moved forward immediately. Nathan's guard shifted. Nathan lifted one hand. Caleb stopped. The old Caleb would have taken that as insult. This one looked at the boundary stones, then at Sarah, and remained where he was. The distance between them was only 10 feet. It felt like 6 years. Sarah stood on Reed's soil. Caleb stood on the road outside it. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through Sarah's gray cloak. Evening light softened her face, but did not weaken it. She looked tired, pale, full-bodied and steady in a way Caleb had once dismissed because he did not understand the strength required to stay gentle among people who treated gentleness as invitation. His gaze lowered to her bare hand, then lifted. Sarah. Her name sounded different now, less certain, more careful. Good. She said nothing. Caleb swallowed. I came to take you home. The sentence landed exactly where the old wound had been. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she answered softly. I did not leave home. Caleb's expression tightened. I left a place where I was being used. Silence. Nathan Reed stood a few steps behind her, not speaking, not claiming, only present enough to remind everyone there were witnesses now who would not laugh when she was diminished. Caleb looked at him once. Jealousy passed across his face. Brief. Useless. Then Sarah spoke again. You should choose your next words carefully. Caleb looked back at her. For the first time in all the years she had known him, he seemed to understand that careful did not mean controlling the room. It meant not breaking what little remained. He looked down at the ring in his palm. I found the ledger, he said. Sarah's face did not change. The debts are paid. I know. No, she said gently. You read it. That is not the same as knowing. The words struck him visibly. He closed his fingers around the ring. The pack is falling apart. Sarah nodded once. I assumed it would stumble. They need you. There it was. The sentence she had expected. Not I hurt you. Not I was wrong. Need. A prettier chain. Sarah breathed out slowly. Needing me is not the same as respecting me. Caleb went still. Behind her, even Nathan's guards seemed to stop breathing. Caleb's mouth parted, but no answer came. Good. Some truths needed silence around them to be heard. Sarah continued. For 6 years, I made your rule easier. I made your elders calmer. I made your mistakes survivable. And you called that useful. His face tightened. I was angry. No, she said. You were comfortable. That was worse. They both knew it. The river moved quietly beyond the trees. Caleb looked at her, And for the first time, Sarah saw the beginning of understanding that did not arrive dressed as pride. Too late, but real enough to hurt. I did not know everything you carried, he said. Sarah held his gaze. You did not ask. The answer was calm, final. And somewhere behind Caleb's eyes, the Alpha King began to understand that the woman standing across from him had not come to the border to be convinced. She had come only because she was no longer afraid to be seen leaving. Caleb Blackthorne understood what he had destroyed only when Sarah Whitfield did not move toward him. That was the cruelty of it. Not the words she spoke. Not the border stones between them. Not Nathan Reed standing behind her with quiet authority. Caleb could neither command nor dismiss. Her stillness. Once, Sarah's body had always leaned toward him without meaning to. A small turn when he entered a room. A softened breath when he said her name. A patient pause when he was angry, as if some part of her had always been ready to receive whatever weight he brought home. Now she stood on reed soil with her gray cloak moving in the evening wind, soft face calm, bare hand visible, and not one part of her reached for him. Caleb looked at the ring in his palm. Silver. Cold. Returned. I was wrong, he said. The words sounded too small for the damage. Sarah did not disagree. That hurt more than accusation. Behind her, Nathan Reed's guards remained still. The river moved quietly beyond the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called once and then went silent, as if even the forest understood this was not a conversation to interrupt. Caleb lifted his eyes. Come home. Sarah's expression changed then. Only slightly. Not anger. Disappointment. As if he had taken the one honest sentence he had managed and buried it beneath the oldest mistake. I told you, she said. I did not leave home. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had ruled warriors through border wars, faced elder rebellions, ordered executions without letting his hand shake. But this woman's quiet correction left him defenseless. Blackthorne is your pack. It was the place I served. You were Luna. I was labor wearing a title. The sentence landed cleanly. No bitterness. No drama. Just truth, spoken by someone who had already survived needing him to understand it. Caleb looked toward Nathan. Jealousy rose again, ugly and instinctive. He cannot replace what we were. Sarah followed his gaze, then returned to him. Nathan did not ask to replace anything. That stopped him. He offered protection, she continued. Not ownership. You should learn the difference before you speak of what we were. Nathan's face did not change, but the words reached him. Caleb saw it in the slight stilling of the rival Alpha's shoulders. Respect, not possession. Another thing Caleb had taken too long to recognize. He closed his fingers around the lunar ring. The pack needs you. Sarah looked at him. And when I was there? He had no answer. She stepped closer to the boundary stones, still on reed soil. When I was there, Caleb, did the pack need me? Or did it simply consume me quietly enough that no one had to call it need? His name in her mouth struck him harder than your majesty had. Not tender, not intimate. A memory without a door. I did not see it, he said. No, her answer came immediately. You saw it. You benefited from it. You only failed to name it until it was gone. Silence fell. Heavy. Precise. Caleb lowered his head. For the first time, he did not try to defend himself against her accuracy. That was when the first true understanding came. He had not destroyed her in one night. That would have been easier to regret. He had destroyed the small places where she once believed she mattered. One council meeting at a time. One delayed thank you. One public silence when elders dismissed her. One glance toward Madison when Sarah needed his protection. One assumption that she would always repair what he broke because she had done it so beautifully before. He had not shattered her. He had worn her down and called the dust loyalty. Caleb's throat tightened. I thought you were strong enough to endure it. Sarah's eyes softened. Not for him. For the woman she had been. I was. The answer cut worse than if she had said no. That was the problem, she said. You all learned how much I could carry and decided that meant you could keep adding more. Behind her, one of Nathan's guards looked away. Ryan should have been here, Caleb thought suddenly. Ryan would have heard that and understood it before Caleb did. Perhaps everyone had understood before Caleb did. Perhaps they had all built their comfort on Sarah's endurance and called her gentle, because calling her exploited would have demanded shame. Caleb took a slow breath. What do I do? Sarah stared at him. For a moment, something like disbelief touched her face. Then it passed. You go back. I cannot. You can. The pack is falling apart. No, she said. The pack is learning what it refused to learn while I made refusal painless. His mouth closed. Sarah looked toward the river. Evening light rested softly against her cheek, making her appear almost peaceful. Not happy, not untouched. Peaceful in the way a storm becomes after leaving the house it once flooded. You will sign your own orders, she said. You will listen to the people you ignored because I was listening for you. You will tell the elders no. You will stop letting Madison's comfort outrank everyone else's dignity. You will learn the names of the widows. You will ask the healers what they need before the medicine runs out. You will read the ledgers before they become emergencies. Caleb listened. Each sentence was not advice. It was an inventory of his failures. And you? He asked quietly. Sarah looked back at him. I will rest. The simplicity of it broke something in him. Not because it was cruel, because in 6 years, he could not remember asking whether she ever had. Nathan stepped forward then, not between them, but near enough that the shape of the conversation changed. Alpha Blackthorne, he said. Caleb's eyes lifted. Nathan's voice remained even. Sarah Whitfield is under Reed protection by her own request. She is free to leave this territory if she chooses. She is free to stay if she chooses. Any attempt to pressure her across that boundary will be treated as aggression. Caleb's wolf rose at the warning. Then Sarah's earlier words stopped him. Protection, not ownership. He forced the wolf down. For her. Too late to matter, perhaps, but not too late to prevent another wound. Caleb nodded once. I understand. Nathan studied him. See that you do. Caleb looked back at Sarah. The ring in his palm felt heavier now than any crown. He held it out. Not across the boundary. Just enough for her to see. I brought this. Sarah's gaze dropped to the lunar ring. For a moment, the past stood between them. The ceremony. The vows. Her younger face beneath white flowers. His hand sliding the ring onto hers with pride he had mistaken for love. Then Sarah looked up. You may keep it. Caleb's breath caught. I thought that I would take it back. He said nothing. Sarah shook her head gently. No, I left it because it belonged to the role. Not to me. His hand closed around it slowly. What belongs to you? My name, she said. No hesitation. My silence. My time. My body. My rest. My future. Each word moved across the distance like a door locking. Not violently. Securely. Caleb bowed his head. He had not knelt. Not physically. But something in him lowered all the same. I am sorry. Sarah watched him. This was the apology she had wanted once. Not in those exact words. Not at the border. But years ago, after the first council meeting where Elder Grant spoke over her and Caleb let it pass. After Madison's first smile across a dinner table. After the winter, she paid burial funds and Caleb praised the pack's resilience without asking who had bought it time. An apology then might have been a bridge. Now it was only a stone placed beside a road she no longer traveled. I know, she said. Caleb looked up. The softness of the answer almost killed him. Not forgiveness. Recognition. Worse. Because it meant his regret was real and still not enough. Sarah turned slightly toward Nathan. I am tired. Nathan nodded immediately. Then we go inside. No question. No performance. No claim. Only response. Caleb saw it. The ease of being heard. The absence of negotiation around her need. Sarah started to walk away. Panic moved through Caleb before pride could stop it. Sarah. She paused. Did not turn. He forced the words out. Will I see you again? The question came out quieter than he intended. Smaller. Human. Sarah stood still for a long moment. Then she looked over her shoulder. If I choose. The answer was perfect in its mercy, and merciless in its truth. Caleb nodded. Because there was nothing else he had the right to do. Sarah walked back toward the border station beside Nathan Reed. The gray cloak Grace had given her moved in the evening wind. She did not lean on Nathan. She did not need to. But he walked close enough that if she stumbled, help would arrive without becoming a cage. That was the difference. Caleb remained outside the boundary stones until the door closed behind her. Only then did he look down at the ring. For 6 years, he had believed Sarah's place was beside him because he had given her one. Now he understood. A place given without respect was only a prettier form of confinement. Behind him, the road to Blackthorne territory waited. A pack in disorder. A council afraid of its own incompetence. A woman named Madison who had never been the real problem. Only the excuse he had allowed himself. A chair that would remain empty. Caleb mounted his horse slowly. The ring stayed in his palm. He did not put it away. Let it cut. Let it remind him. The day Sarah left the pack, Caleb Blackthorne finally understood what he had destroyed. Not just a marriage. Not just a Luna bond. Not just the quiet machinery that kept his kingdom steady. He had destroyed the last version of Sarah Whitfield who still believed being needed could someday become being loved. And by the time he understood the difference, she no longer needed him to know it. Caleb Blackthorne returned to a pack that no longer knew how to pretend. That was the first change. Not the missing chair. Not the unfinished ledgers. Not the cold space in his chamber where Sarah's presence had once softened the walls without asking to be noticed. The pretending was gone. By the time Caleb rode back through the eastern gate, the Blackthorne Pack house had become honest in the ugliest way. Servants argued openly near the kitchen doors. Two patrol captains stood in the courtyard with wet maps, speaking over each other until neither order could be understood. A healer rushed past carrying empty medicine bottles, muttering that Sarah would have known where the emergency stock had been moved. Sarah. Her name followed Caleb from the gate to the front steps. Not loudly, not respectfully, desperately. He dismounted without speaking. Ryan Carter met him at the entrance. The beta's face told him enough. How bad? Caleb asked. Ryan looked toward the pack house. Bad enough that no one can still call her convenient. The words landed cleanly. Caleb accepted them. 3 days ago, he would have punished the tone. Tonight, punishment would only prove he had learned nothing. Council chamber, Caleb said. Ryan followed him inside. The building felt different without Sarah. That should not have been possible. Stone did not change because one woman left. Wood did not remember the hands that polished it. Corridors did not know whose footsteps had passed through them at midnight with documents held neatly against a tired chest. And yet everything felt harsher, sharper, unmended, as if Sarah had not made the pack house beautiful. She had made it bearable. The council was already waiting when Caleb entered. Elder Thomas Grant sat stiffly near the table. Madison Hale stood by the window in a cream dress, her face carefully composed. Several younger elders looked exhausted enough to forget arrogance. The Luna chair remained empty. No one had touched it. Good. Caleb walked to the head of the table, then stopped before sitting. His hand closed around Sarah's ring in his pocket. He did not take the throne-like seat at the head. Instead, he turned toward the empty Luna chair. For a long moment, he only looked at it. Then he faced the council. From tonight forward, no one sits there. Madison's eyes lifted quickly. Elder Grant frowned. My king. Caleb's voice remained even. That chair belonged to Sarah Whitfield. Not to the next woman the court finds convenient. Not to Madison. Not to any symbol you want to place there to make her absence easier to ignore. The room went silent. Madison's lips parted, then closed. For once, she seemed unsure which expression would serve her best. Elder Grant recovered first. With respect, Your Majesty, the pack requires a Luna presence. The pack had won, Caleb said. No one answered, because everyone knew what came after that, and we used her until she left. Caleb placed the pack ledger on the table. Sarah's ledger. He had carried it back himself. The final line remained open. All debts paid. No one owes me anything. He turned the book so the council could see it. This is what she left us. Elder Grant's gaze dropped to the page. His face tightened. A younger elder looked away. Madison whispered, she meant to shame us. Caleb looked at her. No, Madison stilled. She meant to be done. The answer seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. Caleb understood why. Shame could still be argued with. A woman being done left no door open. He turned to Ryan. Read the names. Ryan stepped forward with a second stack of papers. What names? The widows. The orphan pups. The families receiving grain. The warriors whose medicine was delayed. Every person Sarah was carrying quietly enough for us to pretend the pack was functioning by leadership alone. Ryan watched him for a moment, then nodded. He began reading. The first name was Abigail Moore, widow of a border guard killed in winter patrol. The second was Daniel Price, silver burn injury, unpaid healer debt covered through Sarah's personal allowance. The third was Elsie Hart, Omega mother of 3, grain voucher corrected twice because Elder Grant had marked her household as inactive. Elder Grant shifted. Caleb looked at him. Did you mark her inactive? The elder's throat moved. There were irregularities in the records. Her husband died. Grant said nothing. Sarah corrected it. Still nothing. Caleb's voice hardened. You will deliver the grain yourself before sunrise. Grant's face flushed. My king, that is not an elder's role. No, Caleb said. It was Sarah's burden. Now it is your consequence. The room changed. Not with rebellion. With fear. Not fear of violence. Fear of accountability. Caleb almost laughed at the difference. He had spent years mistaking obedience for order. Sarah had spent years creating order from the damage obedience hid. Ryan continued reading. Name after name. Each one a small proof. Each one a quiet labor Caleb had never seen because he had never bothered to stand where Sarah stood. By the 10th name, Madison had gone pale. By the 15th, Elder Grant stopped looking at the table. By the 20th, Caleb felt the ring cut into his palm through the fabric of his pocket. Good. Let it cut. When Ryan finished, the chamber remained silent. Caleb spoke into it. Tomorrow, every elder will take one section of Sarah's work and learn it fully. Not supervise. Not delegate. Learn. Grant looked offended. Caleb did not care. The healer accounts. The widow stipends. The patrol revisions. The village complaints. The ration ledgers. The burial funds. If you fail, the pack suffers. This time, no woman will stand quietly between your incompetence and its consequences. Madison's voice came thinly. And me? Caleb looked at her. There had been a time when he would have softened at the question. Not out of love. Out of habit. Out of the ease of being admired by someone who asked less of his conscience. That weakness no longer looked romantic to him. Only cowardly. You will step back from council matters. Her face drained. Caleb, the name sounded wrong here. Too intimate for a room where Sarah had been publicly reduced. He held her gaze. You knew what they were saying. Madison's expression flickered. I did not make you say it. No, Caleb said. But you enjoyed hearing it. The room went still. Madison swallowed. For the first time, no one rescued her with politeness. Caleb continued, quieter now. That is enough. Her eyes shone, the whether from humiliation or anger he could not tell. Once, he might have cared enough to separate the two. Tonight, he only understood that Sarah had stood in rooms like this and been left alone with worse. Madison left without another word. The door closed softly behind her. Caleb looked back at the empty chair. It remained empty. Still, accusing nothing, needing no defense. That was Sarah's power even in absence. She did not have to demand the room change. The room simply could not remain the same after she was gone. Later, when the council finally dispersed with assignments, they were too tired and frightened to protest. Caleb remained alone. Ryan stood at the doorway. You did one right thing, he said. Caleb looked at the ledger. One right thing does not return her. No, the answer was blunt. Mercifully so. Ryan stepped farther into the room. She may never come back. I know. Do you? Caleb closed his eyes. He saw Sarah at the boundary stones. Gray cloak. Bare hand. Calm face. If I choose. He opened his eyes again. I know. Ryan nodded once and left. Caleb stood beside the Luna chair long after the lamps burned low. At last, he took Sarah's ring from his pocket and placed it on the table before the empty seat. Not as a claim. Not as bait. Not as a promise she would return. As evidence. As reminder. As something cold and silver that had once meant ownership and now meant failure. Outside, the pack house moved uncertainly through its first night of learning to function without her. Inside, Caleb Blackthorne finally understood that regret was not the same as repair. Regret looked backward and bled. Repair faced the damage and worked without applause. Sarah had done that for 6 years. Now, for the first time, Caleb sat alone in the room she had left behind and began reading the ledger from the beginning. Sarah Whitfield did not return to Blackthorne territory. Not after the first week. Not after the second. I was wrong. I diminished what I did not understand. The pack is learning what you carried. I am learning it too. She folded the letter afterward and placed it inside the pack ledger. Not because she forgave him. Not because she wanted to keep his words close. Because it belonged with the accounts. Another debt named too late. Nathan Reed did not ask to read it. That mattered. He sat across from her in the small border house, reviewing trade maps while Sarah held the letter in silence. Firelight moved across the room, quiet and gold. Outside, reed wolves changed patrol beneath a clear sky. Finally, Nathan said, "Do you want me to send it back?" Sarah looked at him. "No. Do you want to answer?" "No," he nodded once. No disappointment. No pressure. No lesson hidden beneath patience. Sarah had begun to understand that respect often looked uneventful. No dramatic rescue. No claims spoken before witnesses. No hand on her shoulder unless she offered the space first. Only room. Room to sleep. Room to decide. Room to be silent without someone mistaking silence for agreement. That was harder to accept than she expected. For 6 years, Sarah had lived in motion. If she was not solving something, preventing something, smoothing something, feeding someone, remembering something, then guilt came looking for her. At Reed territory, no one praised her for exhaustion. They simply did not require it. The first morning she slept past sunrise, she woke in panic. The room was too bright. Her body jolted upright before her mind caught up. Patrol routes, healer lists, council documents, the winter grain allocations. Then she remembered. None of them belonged to her anymore. The realization should have freed her. Instead, she cried, quietly, into both hands. Not because she missed the burden, because some part of her did not yet know who she was without it. A soft knock came at the door. Sarah wiped her face quickly. Yes. An older Reed healer named Margaret entered carrying tea. She saw Sarah's eyes and did not pretend otherwise. Grief after escape is still grief, Margaret said. Sarah looked away. I am not sure I escaped. Margaret set the tea beside the bed. You crossed a border at dawn with no permission and no apology. That is close enough. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. The healer sat only after Sarah nodded. Your body will expect danger for a while, Margaret continued. It will hear quiet and call it a trap. It will feel rest and call it laziness. Do not believe it every time. Sarah looked down at her bare hand. The ring mark had begun to fade. Not disappear. Fade. It feels wrong, she admitted. What does? Being unnecessary. Margaret's expression softened. That is not what you are feeling. Sarah lifted her eyes. You are feeling and used. The distinction settled inside the room. Sarah did not answer. Margaret touched the teacup once, turning the handle toward her. There is a difference. After that, Sarah began learning small things. How to eat breakfast while it was warm. How to walk through a hallway without collecting problems. How to hear raised voices and not automatically step between them. How to let Reed Pack members argue, resolve, apologize, or fail without making herself the bridge every time. The first time she passed 2 young guards disputing patrol rotation, she stopped by instinct. Nathan, walking beside her, stopped too. But he did not ask her to intervene. He only waited. Sarah listened for 3 breaths, then forced herself to keep walking. Her hands trembled afterward. Nathan noticed. They can ask their captain, he said. Sarah gave a small laugh with no humor. And if they do not, then their captain learns he trained them badly. That sounds inefficient. It is, Nathan said. But it keeps one woman from becoming a pack's unpaid conscience. Sarah looked at him. The words were too accurate to be accidental. You have opinions about Blackthorne. I have reports. From spies. From refugees. That silenced her. Nathan's gaze remained forward. Your pack has sent us many people over the years. Omegas. Widows. Debt-bound families. Second sons who refused elder orders. They usually arrive apologizing for needing shelter. Sarah's throat tightened. I did not know. No, Nathan said. You were busy keeping the people who stayed alive. She did not know whether that was comfort or indictment. Perhaps both. By the 4th week, Sarah began helping in the Reed infirmary. Not because anyone assigned her. Because she wanted to. There was a boy with a fever who refused medicine unless someone told him stories about border wolves. Sarah told him 3, badly. He drank the tonic anyway. There was an old woman with stiff hands who needed letters written to her daughter in the northern hills. Sarah wrote them slowly, asking what words the woman wanted instead of choosing polite ones for her. There was a pregnant Omega who came in shaking because her mate had died 2 months earlier and she did not know whether the pack would still protect her child. Sarah sat with her until Nathan arrived and confirmed, in writing, that the child's food, shelter, and healer care were already secured. The woman cried then. Sarah nearly did too. Not because Reed territory was perfect. It was not. People still argued. Supplies still ran late. Pride still appeared in rooms where it had not been invited. But here, when something failed, no one looked first for a woman to silently absorb the failure. That changed everything. One evening, Sarah stood outside the infirmary washing blood from her hands after stitching a hunter's shoulder. The sky had gone violet. Pine shadows stretched long across the yard. Nathan approached with 2 cups of coffee. She accepted one. Thank you. He leaned beside the railing, leaving space between them. You looked alive today. Sarah almost laughed. Covered in blood? Useful blood. She turned her head. Nathan realized the word too late. His expression changed. Sarah, it is all right. No, he said quietly. It is not. The correction was immediate. Clean. No defense. No explanation about how he meant it. No demand that she understand him generously. He simply accepted the damage a word could carry. Sarah looked down at the coffee. For a moment, Caleb's voice returned. Useful. Loyal. Quiet. Easy to manage. Then it faded. Not gone. Less sharp. Nathan set his cup aside. I should have chosen better. Sarah studied him. You did. He frowned slightly. I chose carelessly. No, she said. You chose to correct yourself. The space between them changed. Not romance. Not yet. Something gentler. A trust forming without needing to announce itself. Nathan's eyes moved to her bare hand, then away before the glance became a question. Sarah noticed that too. Do you ever want to ask? She said. About Caleb? About the ring. Nathan looked toward the darkening trees. No, Sarah was surprised. Why? Because if you want me to know, you will tell me. If you do not, asking turns my curiosity into weight you have to carry. Sarah's chest tightened. A month ago, that sentence might have frightened her. Now it simply made the evening quieter. She looked down at her hand. The mark is fading. Nathan did not look. He waited. Sarah continued. I thought I would feel freer when it did. And do you? Sometimes. And the other times? She smiled faintly. I feel like I am disappearing. Nathan's voice lowered. You are not disappearing. You are becoming unclaimed. It can feel similar at first. Sarah looked at him then. Really looked. At the steady face. The controlled strength. The absence of hunger in his patience. Who taught you that? His expression shifted. A shadow. My mother. Sarah did not ask more. Respect could move both ways. The next morning, another letter arrived from Blackthorne. Not from Caleb. From Ryan. The handwriting was blunt, uneven, impatient. He has changed the council assignments. Grant is delivering grain himself and hates it. Madison no longer attends strategy meetings. The healer accounts are a disaster, but at least now everyone knows they are a disaster. Grace misses you. The pack misses you. I will not say we need you. You told them the difference, and some of us heard it. Sarah read that line twice. Some of us heard it. Her eyes burned. Not for Caleb. For the possibility that leaving had done what staying never could. It had forced people to hear the truth without her softening the sound. She wrote back to Ryan. One sentence. Take care of Grace. Then she stopped. After a long pause, she added another. And make sure the Eastern families receive grain before frost. She stared at the second line for a long time, then crossed it out. Slowly, deliberately. Ryan could handle it. Or fail. Either way, it was no longer hers to carry. She folded the letter. Outside, Reed territory moved through the morning without asking her to hold it together. Sarah stood by the window, pale sunlight on her face, her body soft and steady beneath a plain blue dress, her bare hand resting against the wooden sill. For the first time since she crossed the border, the quiet did not feel like a trap. It felt like space. And somewhere far beyond the river, Blackthorne Pack would either learn to stand without her or fall honestly. Sarah hoped they learned. But she no longer confused hope with responsibility. Sarah Whitfield returned to the western border only once before winter. Not to go back. Not to forgive. Not to stand where Caleb Blackthorne could mistake her presence for hesitation. She came because Grace Miller asked. The message arrived at Reed territory folded around a pressed lavender stem, the kind Grace used to tuck into Sarah's linen drawer when the pack house smelled too much like smoke and old anger. Luna. The first word had been crossed out. Sarah, please come if you can. Not for him. For us. The lower village is holding the first open council. The Omegas are allowed to speak. Elder Grant is required to listen. I think you should see what leaving did. Sarah read the note twice. Then a third time. Nathan Reed stood across the infirmary table, wrapping fresh bandage around a hunter's forearm. He did not look at her until the hunter left. You want to go, he said. Sarah folded the note carefully. I do not know what I want. That is allowed. She looked at him. The simplicity of the answer still startled her sometimes. At Blackthorne, uncertainty had always been treated like weakness. Someone else would decide before Sarah could finish understanding herself, then call the decision stability. Here, uncertainty was permitted to breathe. Sarah placed the note beside the medicine tray. I do not want Caleb to think I am returning. Then we make that clear. We. Nathan's expression remained calm. If you want an escort. Sarah studied him. No claim in his voice. No eagerness. No hidden triumph at the thought of standing beside her in Caleb's territory. Only an offer. She nodded once. I do. 2 days later, Sarah crossed the Western River in a reed carriage, not on foot, not in rain, not running from anything. That mattered. The sky was pale blue. Frost silvered the grass along the road. Nathan rode beside the carriage with 4 guards behind him, enough to make the boundary clear and not enough to look like invasion. Sarah wore a simple dark blue dress beneath a gray cloak. No crown, no lunar ring, no Blackthorne crest. Her hair was braided loosely over one shoulder. Her face looked fuller after rest, softer with sleep she no longer had to steal. When she caught her reflection in the carriage window, she did not see a runaway. She saw a woman visiting the ruins of a house that had once called itself home. The Blackthorne Lower Village had gathered near the old meeting square. Sarah heard voices before she saw faces. Not shouting. Speaking. That was new. Omega mothers stood beside warriors. Healers held written lists. Farmers waited with grain records. Clerks moved between groups, collecting notes instead of dismissing them. Elder Grant stood on a raised platform, stiff with humiliation, while Ryan Carter read a complaint aloud from a widow whose roof repairs had been delayed 3 winters in a row. Sarah stepped down from the carriage. The square went quiet. Not completely. Not with fear. With recognition. Grace saw her first. She stood near the front, carrying a bundle of council papers against her chest the way Sarah once had. Her eyes widened, then filled. She did not run forward, though Sarah could see the effort it took. Instead, Grace bowed. Not to Aluna. To Sarah. That hurt. Beautifully. Others followed. A healer. 2 Omega women. A young guard whose mother Sarah had once written to after his first patrol injury. Small bows. Awkward. Sincere. Sarah wanted to tell them to stop. She did not. Some acknowledgments came too late and still deserved to be received. Nathan dismounted beside her, but stayed half a step back. Caleb Blackthorne stood near the platform. Of course he did. No crown. No ceremonial coat. Just dark winter clothes and a face that had learned sleeplessness. His eyes found Sarah immediately, then moved to Nathan, then back. Jealousy did not rise this time. Or if it did, he buried it before it reached his mouth. Progress was sometimes only the absence of another wound. Caleb approached slowly. He stopped several feet away. Sarah. Caleb. Not your majesty. Not my alpha. Only his name. His throat moved. Thank you for coming. I came for Grace. I know. He said it without flinching. That, too, was new. The square watched carefully. Sarah looked around. What is this? Ryan answered before Caleb could. Open council. Monthly now. Every household can submit complaints directly. Elders are required to answer in public. Elder Grant looked like he had swallowed stones. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. And the healer accounts. Ryan's mouth twitched. A disaster. Caleb added quietly. Less of one than last month. Sarah looked at him. He did not ask for praise. Good. Grace stepped forward then, unable to hold herself still any longer. I kept the Eastern families on the list, she said quickly. And the Orphan Tonic Fund. And I made Elder Grant sign the roof repairs before winter. Sarah's eyes softened. You did. Grace nodded, proud and nervous at once. I used your old format. Then she seemed to realize what she had said, and her face flushed. I mean, Sarah touched her arm. Good. Grace's breath shook. The word was small. It gave her back something Sarah knew she had once lived too long without. Caleb watched that exchange in silence. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he was learning that leadership often looked like letting someone else be seen. The meeting resumed slowly around Sarah, though people still glanced at her, as if afraid she might vanish if unobserved. An Omega woman stepped onto the platform and read from a paper with trembling hands. My son was denied training because his father owed debt to Elder Grant's household. A murmur moved through the square. Grant's face darkened. Ryan looked at him. Caleb did too. Is that true? Caleb asked. Grant opened his mouth. Closed it. Yes, my king. Caleb's voice hardened. Debt does not pass to children. The boy trains tomorrow. The woman's eyes filled. She bowed quickly. Sarah stood still. The old version of her would have felt relief, then responsibility. She would have noted the boy's name, checked the training roster, followed up with the guard captain, ensured no retaliation came through some quieter channel. Her hand twitched toward a pocket that held no ledger. Nathan noticed. He said nothing. The urge passed. Not easily, but it passed. Caleb's gaze flickered to her hand. He saw it too. For a moment, grief crossed his face. Not because she had helped, because he understood how automatic the burden had become. After the meeting, Grace walked Sarah toward the old infirmary garden. "I wanted you to see," Grace said. Sarah looked at the frost-covered herbs. "Why?" Grace's voice softened. "Because some of them think you left and stopped caring." Sarah breathed in. "And you?" "I think you left because caring almost killed you." The answer entered Sarah quietly. She looked at Grace, the girl who had once trembled outside her chamber door, and asked whether she should inform the Alpha King. Grace looked older now, stronger, still gentle, not broken. Sarah touched her cheek. "I am proud of you." Grace cried then, openly, without apologizing. Sarah let her. Across the garden, Caleb stood near the gate but did not approach. Nathan stood on the opposite side, speaking to Ryan about border medicine exchanges. No one crowded Sarah's grief. No one used it. For once, she was allowed to feel something without it becoming someone else's crisis. When the sun began to lower, Sarah returned to the carriage. Caleb walked with her only as far as the square's edge. "I have something," he said. Sarah stopped. He held out a folded paper. No seal, no crest. She did not take it immediately. "What is it?" "A copy of the new council order. It states that no Luna, mate, Omega, servant, or household member may be made solely responsible for pack operations without authority, pay, and public acknowledgement." Sarah stared at him. The words were not romantic. That was why they mattered. Too many apologies tried to become poetry. This one had become policy. She took the paper. "Read it once, then folded it again." "This is good." Caleb's face tightened. The restraint it took him not to ask if that changed anything was visible. It did not. But it was good. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For making us see it." Sarah looked at him then. "No," she said gently. "I did not make you see it." He went still. "I left. What you saw afterward was your responsibility." Caleb lowered his eyes. "You are right." The answer came without defense. Sarah held the council order between her fingers. For the first time, standing near him did not feel like standing near an open wound. It felt like standing near a scar, part of her history, not her whole body. Caleb looked toward Nathan, then back to her. "Are you happy there?" Sarah considered lying politely, then chose not to. "I am learning how to be." His eyes closed briefly. "Pain. Acceptance. Both." "I am glad," he said. The words cost him. She could tell. They were still the right words. Nathan approached the carriage and opened the door without touching her. Sarah stepped inside. Before the door closed, Caleb spoke one last time. "Will you come again?" Sarah looked at Grace, standing behind him, Ryan beside the platform, the Omega mothers gathering their papers, Elder Grant listening because consequences had finally been attached to dismissal. Then she looked at Caleb. Perhaps. Hope moved in his face. She stopped it before it became claim. "For them." He nodded. "For them." The carriage began to move. Sarah watched Blackthorne Village pass by through the window. The old pack house rose in the distance, no longer looking as large as it once had. Maybe buildings changed when fear left the body. Maybe she had simply grown beyond its shadow. Nathan rode beside the carriage until the road turned west. At the bend, Sarah looked back once. Caleb stood in the square, not chasing, not calling, not commanding, just watching. This time, Sarah did not look away because she had to. She looked away because she was ready. The carriage crossed the river before nightfall. Reed territory opened ahead, quiet and frost blue beneath the evening sky. Sarah unfolded the council order once more and read the first line. "No person shall be made invisible by the work they perform." Her throat tightened. For 6 years, she had wanted Caleb to understand what he had destroyed. Now he had begun to build something from the ruins. Not for her return, not for forgiveness, for the people still inside the walls she had escaped. That mattered. It was not enough to bring her back, but it was enough to let one more piece of anger rest. Sarah folded the paper and placed it beside her, not with the old ledger, not with Caleb's letters, but in a new pocket of her travel bag. A place for things that were no longer debts. Only proof. Outside, Nathan rode in silence. Inside, Sarah leaned back against the carriage seat and let herself feel tired without calling it failure. Behind her, Blackthorne territory grew smaller. Ahead, the road home no longer pointed backward. Spring came to Reed territory without asking Sarah Whitfield to earn it. That was how she knew she had begun to heal. Not because the past stopped hurting. Not because Caleb Blackthorne's name no longer changed the air when someone spoke it. Not because the ring mark had fully faded from her finger. It had not. Some marks left the skin slowly. Some stayed beneath it. Healing was not the absence of memory. It was the first morning Sarah woke to birds outside her window and did not reach for a ledger before remembering she was free. She lay still beneath the pale light, listening. No council bell. No servant rushing down the corridor. No elder waiting with numbers he expected her to fix. No king asleep somewhere behind a locked door while she carried the day before it began. Only birds. Wind. The faint sound of Nathan Reed's guards changing patrol beyond the courtyard. And her own breath. Steady. Unhurried. Hers. Sarah rose slowly and dressed in a soft cream gown that fit her body without trying to hide it. No structured court bodice. No sharp lines chosen to make her look thinner, colder, more acceptable beside a throne. The fabric moved with her. Gentle, warm, honest. When she looked in the mirror, she saw herself clearly. Pale skin, full cheeks, soft body, brown eyes no longer trained to lower first. For years, Blackthorne women had called her pretty in the way one complimented something harmless. Reed territory had not made her beautiful. It had simply stopped asking her to apologize for being seen. A knock came at the door. Come in. Grace Miller entered carrying a basket of folded linens. Though she had been told 3 times she no longer worked as Sarah's maid. Old habits healed slowly too. Her red hair was braided back. Her cheeks flushed from morning air. You are awake, Grace said. Sarah smiled. You sound surprised. You used to be awake before everyone. I used to be exhausted before everyone too. Grace laughed, then stopped, as if still learning that laughter did not need permission. She set the basket down. The Blackthorne riders arrived. Sarah's hand stilled over the comb. Grace added quickly, not Caleb. Ryan. Sarah breathed again. What does he need? He brought the spring report. Sarah looked at her through the mirror. The what? Grace smiled a little. You will want to see it. Sarah almost said no. The words sat ready on her tongue, familiar now, useful now. But Grace's expression held no pressure, only brightness. So Sarah nodded. I will come down. The Reed Hall was filled with morning light when Sarah entered. Nathan stood near the main table with Ryan Carter. Both men, bent over a document, waited at the corners by coffee cups and a small knife. Ryan looked tired, as always, but less grim than winter had left him. He straightened when Sarah approached. Sarah. Ryan. No title. Good. He slid the document toward her. I thought you should have a copy. Sarah did not touch it yet. Nathan stepped back slightly, giving her the space to decide whether the past could approach. Sarah read the title. Blackthorne Pack Spring Accountability Report. The words were so dry, so unromantic, so painfully bureaucratic that for one strange second she wanted to laugh. Then she read the first page. Widow roof repairs completed. Orphan tonic fund expanded. Omega Grievance Council made permanent. Elder household debt practices reviewed. 3 illegal inherited debts erased. Healer supply routes split among 4 officers instead of 1 unpaid household authority. Luna chair formally retired until a future Luna accepted the role with written authority, compensation, and the right to refuse duties outside her consent. Sarah stopped reading. The room blurred. Not because it was enough. Nothing could be enough for 6 years of being reduced to convenience. But it was real. A real change in a place that had once survived by pretending her pain was personality. Ryan cleared his throat. Grant resigned. Sarah looked up. He did, after being forced to read grain complaints aloud for 2 months. Grace made a small satisfied sound. Nathan's mouth almost curved. Sarah looked back at the report. And Madison? Ryan's expression grew careful. She left court before winter ended. Sarah waited for the old sting. It did not arrive. Only a faint ache where comparison used to live. Where did she go? South. To her sister's estate. Grace looked surprised. Did Caleb send her away? No, Ryan said. He stopped protecting her from consequences. She chose distance after that. Sarah nodded. There was no triumph in it. Madison had not destroyed her marriage alone. She had only stood near the cracks Caleb refused to repair. Blaming her would have been easier. Sarah no longer needed easy lies. Ryan slid a smaller folded paper across the table. This is from him. The room changed. Slightly. Nathan said nothing. Grace looked down. Sarah stared at the paper. Caleb's handwriting marked the outside. Sarah Whitfield. No Luna. No title. She picked it up. The seal was plain. She opened it. Sarah, the pack has survived the winter. Not because I learned quickly, but because others finally stopped being forced to make my ignorance painless. I will not ask you to return. I will not tell you the pack needs you. It does, in some ways. I do, in more ways than I have the right to say. But needing you was never proof that I loved you well. You told me that. I heard you too late. The council order remains. The Luna chair remains empty. Your name is no longer used to cover work no one wants to acknowledge. I am learning to ask before something breaks. I am learning to listen before someone leaves. I am learning that regret is not repair. I hope Reed territory gives you rest. I hope you keep choosing yourself. Caleb. Sarah read the letter once. Then again. The room stayed quiet around her. No one asked what it said. No one asked what she felt. For once, her silence was allowed to belong to her. Finally, she folded the letter. Does he expect a reply? Ryan shook his head. No good. Ryan's eyes softened. He meant that too. Sarah looked toward the window. Outside, spring light rested on the courtyard stones. Reed children ran near the training yard, laughing as a patient guard pretended not to notice them stealing practice ribbons. A healer scolded someone near the infirmary door. Life moved. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but without requiring Sarah to hold every piece in place. She turned back to Ryan. Tell him the report is good. Ryan nodded. Anything else? Sarah thought about it. There were many things she could say. That she was glad he had changed. That she was sorry it cost them everything. That some mornings she still remembered the sound of him fastening the clasp on her sleeve and hated that tenderness had once stood so close to cruelty. That she missed parts of who they had been before understanding too much to ever want them back. Instead, she said the truest thing. Tell him to keep going. Ryan accepted that with a small nod. He left before noon, carrying no promise of Sarah's return. That felt right. In the afternoon, Reed Territory held its spring gathering in the open field beyond the infirmary. Not a royal ceremony. Not a court event. Just tables under cloth awnings, music near the old well, children chasing each other between baskets of bread and flowers. Sarah came because Grace dragged her by the hand, and Margaret the healer threatened to send soup to her room if she stayed hidden. Nathan found her near the edge of the field, watching two young Omegas argue over who had baked the better honey cakes. You look like you were planning to solve that, he said. Sarah folded her arms. I am resisting. Heroically. She smiled. It came easily now. Not always. But more often. Nathan stood beside her, close enough for warmth, far enough for choice. That had become his way. A presence without demand. A strength without cage. Sarah looked at him. You never asked me to stay. His gaze remained on the field. You know you can. That is not the same. No, he turned then. The late sun touched the side of his face, softening the severity others mistook for coldness. I want you to stay, he said. No performance. No claim. No pressure folded inside the confession. Sarah's breath caught. Nathan continued, quieter. But wanting is mine. Choosing is yours. For a moment, the world narrowed. Not in danger. In possibility. Sarah thought of Caleb saying she had nowhere else to go. She thought of the rain-soaked road, the boundary stones, the ring left on the vanity. She thought of the empty Luna chair retired by law. She thought of her own name written without title. Sarah Whitfield. Not Blackthorne's Luna. Not Reed's rescued woman. Sarah. She looked across the field at Grace laughing with a group of healers. At Margaret handing bread to a child. At Ryan's departing tracks already fading beyond the western road. At the people here who had let her become unnecessary before asking who she wanted to be. Then she looked back at Nathan. I am staying, she said. His eyes changed. Not victory. Relief. Carefully held. For now, Sarah added. Nathan's mouth curved. For now. The answer respected the door even as it opened. Sarah reached for his hand. He looked down first, making sure the choice was hers. Then his fingers closed around hers. Warm. Steady. Not ownership. Not rescue. Contact. Across the field, Grace saw and immediately pretended not to badly. Sarah laughed. The sound surprised her. Open. Unashamed. Hers. That evening, when the gathering began to glow beneath lanterns, a messenger from Blackthorne passed through the outer road on his way back east. He saw Sarah standing beneath a flowering tree, one hand in Nathan's, her full face lit by lantern light, her body soft inside a cream dress, her smile small but real. He did not stop. He had not been sent to bring her back, only to witness, perhaps, what returning would never mean again. Days later, Caleb Blackthorne would hear that Sarah had smiled. Not politely, not dutifully, freely. That was the final thing he learned. Love, when learned too late, sometimes meant leaving the door closed from your side. Spring deepened. The Blackthorne, she had not been destroyed, only buried beneath duties other people called love. And once she stopped carrying them, she rose. Not as Luna, not as someone's proof of regret, not as a woman returning to the place that finally valued her absence. She rose as herself, soft, seen, unclaimed, free.